Hey everyone, welcome back to the blog. So, bit more progress today. What I've done is I've lined out all of the inlet and exhaust valves and the shims. Basically, after a good cleaning and hand lapping, you can see on the surface here the angle of the valve, this grey band around it. That's from lapping it in to the actual head. So what you do, you put some grinding paste on it, put it into the head, and then you use a suction cup to spin the valve. And what you can actually tell is that the sound changes as you're doing it by hand, and it feels smoother. And then you take it out, clean everything, and you have to be really careful that you don't get grinding paste on the stem of the valve. You're only trying to do this part here. So again, plenty of brake cleaner and clean out the actual valve stem bore in the head every time. Put some fine paste on and do the job again. This time the valves are actually in really good condition, so they didn't need much lapping, but it's just good practice. It's in the manual and it's quite an old-fashioned technique, and it's just worth doing for the sake of an extra hour or two. It's really worth it. In terms of the head, given all of that a good clean, I'll try and lift it here and show you. So that's looking a lot cleaner. I got the steel rule and I checked to make sure that the whole deck is flat, which it is, thankfully, no warpage or anything. But again, the engine was good, it was running, it's only been removed to do an oil leak, so it shouldn't have been damaged anyway. And over here, sorry, there's just no space in this garage. So that's what the camshafts and cam caps looked like when they came out of the engine. And this is after a bit of elbow grease as well. So again, just cleaning all of these, and then the next job is, once these are cleaned, I'll go back to the head and put the new valve stem seals on, and they come as part of the gasket kit. Once they're in, I can then use the valve spring compressor and start taking all the valves, put them back in the head, and then once the head is on the block, we can put the camshafts in, torque down the cam caps, and then pretty much you're ready to put the shiny new valve cover on. And that's the head. But at the moment, with the block over there, it's all been cleaned, it's ready to go. I'm literally just waiting on a couple of extra O-rings for this oil pump. Now the reason is, there's a seal here, and when you take the rotors out, there's a couple of marks. So you take these out and the circular piece, give them a clean, put them back in, make sure they're all aligned. You check the clearance in the lobes. And then there's also a seal on the other side of this shaft. So there's one O-ring on that other side and this sealing O-ring. So, I mean, yeah, on the gear wheel for the timing belt. So there's a seal behind that nut and bolt there. I think that's really it. There's also a gasket that goes on the crankshaft end, which I do have. But I just thought, if you're going to start torquing bolts up, let's just wait until we have everything and we'll do the job properly. Aside from that, probably more cleaning today. Not so much maybe in this episode. I've also pretty much degreased, cleaned and sprayed the sump. And now you can actually see the block, the high temperature paint I put on the previous day. It's actually come up quite well. And the leaky bit you see is actually WD-40 that I've sprayed across the top of the head where the paper is there. Basically it's just to protect the maintenance surface. That's the bit you want to protect. The rest of it can get rusty, but it's all the gasket surfaces that should be perfectly flush. So you want to make sure they're all lubricated just to stop them getting surface rust until you actually fit things. And then once the bottom end's done, it's really bolting all this other crap on, the turbocharger, all the usual stuff, and then we just work our way in reverse around the garage, picking up all the parts. I've got a new D-cat, which I'm not going to fit this one then. Probably then back over inlet manifold, wiring loom, all that stuff. Then AC compressor, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's organised chaos for now, but we're going to get there. You can see the two timing wheels down there. Again, that's sort of part of the head job. The timing cover, I've got new bearings and pulleys there, and the original crankshaft pulley. So yeah, we're pretty good to go, and it looks like a lot, but it's not. And then the gearbox hasn't moved, that's far too heavy. I'm going to wait until all of this is, you know, basically the engine's built, it's on the stand, and then last job we'll do is connect gearbox to the engine, bring the whole load out, and get it in the car. So, okay. And also, actually, just one last thing worth showing you is this resurfaced flywheel. Now, from the previous episode, you can probably remember the state of it. It was filthy. Took it to the machine shop and they did a CNC mill on it. Instead of putting it in a lathe where you sort of risk getting an uneven surface, they just milled it straight across. And you can see the kind of machine marks there. They just took the minimum off so that it shouldn't affect the biting point of the clutch, because we've got a new clutch and pressure plate and everything. So that looks fantastic. And then obviously they sprayed and coated the backside so everything's silver. Looks really good. Really good job there. And yeah, that's it. So stay tuned and I'll give you another update. Okay, one thing also I want to show you, as I mentioned, the cleaning. You can see here the discoloration. So with anything, basically cleaning is the most important thing. So on this camshaft, you can see it's quite dirty brown, especially discoloration here. Now these are the lobes which it sits the bearing surfaces, so you need those clean. This is the kind of just piece of metal which doesn't actually matter, and these are the lobes that are hitting your valve lifters and opening and closing your valves. So it's critical that all of these kind of load bearing surfaces, contact surfaces, are all clean. So hopefully you can see the shine on this one that I've just finished. It's a lot cleaner. I mean, maybe on camera it doesn't show up, but what you want to do is run your nail over all of these surfaces when it's clean, and that basically, if you can feel anything with your fingernail, that means there's a problem. Fortunately, all of these are clean, the same as the caps, and really cleaning is just, you know, it's boring, but it's one of the most important things. Once they're really clean, what I'll do before I fit them into the head again is actually blast them with some brake cleaner out of the jar. I've been using this horrible old bucket and a spray bottle with brake cleaner out of a tin over there. What I'll do, I've got some brake and clutch cleaner in a canister with a bit of pressure behind it, and I'll take it and blast it through all the lube oil access holes, and same on the head, make sure all the oil galleries are clear. And then I've got a compressor over there in the corner. I'll blast some clean fresh air through it just to make sure everything's finally clean, and then I'll lube it up with assembly lube, which is like a red thick paste, and it just kind of burns off naturally in the oil once you run the engine in. So we'll use the assembly lube, we'll put it on all the bearing shell surfaces, torque everything down to spec, and that'll be it ready to go to fit on the head. But as I say, it's worth it taking your time on cleaning. It's so boring, it's dirty, your hands end up pretty smashed with all the, you should probably wear gloves as well, but again, soaks through the gloves and the plastic gloves disintegrate, so it's not the best for you. But if you have a parts washer, do that. Mine's the old-fashioned method with a bit of Scotch-Brite and some brake cleaner. So whatever works for you, just make sure it's clean. So here's a quick guide on the cylinder head. As you can see, I've done one valve already. There's the lifter in. Now what I've done is I've pushed the valves in from underneath the head. I've put the clamp on, I've put the special tool on. So the springs are in, the valves are in, the valve spring retainer's in, and this metal tool is going to push down the spring and retainer so that the actual top in the center there of the valve is pushing through. And then what we'll do is we'll get these valve stem retainers, we'll drop them in, make sure they're in a circle, and then we'll take the spring pressure off, and as they raise up they'll clamp around the notch on the top of the valve, and that will actually secure the valve in place. We take the whole clamp off, and then we drop in the bucket shim with plenty of oil, give it a good clean, plenty of oil, and it slides in and just drops in, sits there by gravity until the camshaft is installed to lock it in place. So here's one I've cleaned earlier, and this is the one for this valve. Again, as I say, keep everything in order. It's vitally important, really, really critical. So I'll try and get some time lapse of this, and I'll just continue to do the whole valve train, inlet side and exhaust. And that's basically it. Nothing fancy to it. It's just kind of slow, boring, but you have to be careful and clean. Okay, folks, so hopefully you can see from the previous fast forward scene, I've completed the inlet set of valves, so they're all in. The bucket shims are in, everything's cleaned, and then what you see me do in fast motion was pop the valve in from underneath, put the clamp on, then the spring in, compress the spring down with the clamp, and sometimes I was just checking to make sure if I seen the valve move initially, I just popped it back up into place. The friction and the new seal usually keeps it in place as you compress the spring. Once that's down, I think it was this second from the last. This was an absolute nightmare to get in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it's actually easier just to back the tension off and restart. Just give it a wiggle and try and compress it again. Sometimes they're basically a V shape around the valve, and they go in and they drop in place, and when you take the tension off the valve spring, they should slide up and just collect around the edge of the top of the valve, but it doesn't always work to plan. So again, time for a quick coffee, let the back stretch, and then we're going to do the exhaust side. After that, it'll be time to put the camshaft back in, cam caps. I'm just going to literally set them in place. I'm not going to torque them down yet, because if you go by the manual, you're meant to put the 10 head studs in, put the head on the block with the new head gasket, and then you can do the valve clearance check by putting a feeler gauge in between this bucket shim here and here, and in between the camshaft. So as the camshaft rotates, it touches the bucket and pushes the valve down. What we're doing is we're putting a feeler gauge in, and we're going to check the clearance as per the factory spec. If it's out, you actually have to go and remove these discs, which you've seen me clean in the last scene, and you just pop them off, put a new one on after doing a few calculations to work out the size based on the clearance, and then that makes sure all of the valve lash is the correct distance. And once the engine heats up, you've got good contact, you don't have a noisy head, which basically that rattling noise, the tapping noise, clicking, that's what you hear in a lot of high mileage old engines, as this clearance increases with wear. So basically that's it. You want it sounding silky smooth, and it all comes down to calculating your valve clearance between the camshaft and the bucket.